to take the opportunity to introduce myself. I'm the leader of the Ethical Humanist Society here at 1906 Rittenhouse Square. Welcome. There are some more seats sprinkled around. This is the flip side, the two sides of the coin today is that we need more seats. And we need more seats, so that's good and bad. My talk is entitled The Integrity and Humility of Science. The Integrity and Humility of Science. I offered in honor of the 10th anniversary of the court case Kitzmiller versus the Dover School District, a court case that humanists celebrate for liberating science in the classroom. So let's give a round of applause for that. If you don't know about it, you'll know a little bit about it after I speak. If you're going to the program this afternoon, you'll know a lot about it. And if you don't do either of those and you don't know much today, learn about it. It's an important case. I want to emphasize that this event this afternoon and the topic today was inspired by Margaret Downey of the Free Thought Society and Janice Reel of Americans United for Federation. So I want to thank them for creating their vision into reality today. I also want to thank Greg and Antoine, who have been working hours and hours early in the morning, late at night, getting us ready for today. So thank you, Greg and Antoine. I'm looking forward to meeting some of the people that were on the inside of this case that are coming this afternoon. Eric Rothschild and Eddie Ariani of Pepper Hamilton, attorney Steve Harvey, and Lori Lebo, who was a journalist on the inside of this story from the very beginning and the author of The Devil in Dover. As I finished reading Lori's book this week, I felt a great joy. I even teared up at times, imagining the sense of vindication for the parents and students who risked ostracism and braved battling religious intolerance and ignorance. But I also was sobered by remembering the fact that, according to some recent surveys, 35% of adults in this country agree that, quote, evolution is a scientific theory well supported by evidence. 35% agree with that phrase. More, 45% believe that God was created by humans as they are now 10,000 years ago. So all over this supposedly educated country, we have people dismissing evolution as just a theory. Creationists talk about theory as if it was something that you dreamt up after being drunk all night. I stole that from Isaac Asimov. But far from being an inebriated fantasy, science allows us to accept what observation teaches us. It tells us how to discover the facts of life. Science does not have to claim domain over all of life. It doesn't have to fully explain, love, piano music, morality, human imagination. But science has to rule on the facts that we share in our ever-increasingly multicultural world, and free from any ethical, cultural, or political bias. So we have to continue to defend science every day. Now, science is challenged in part because of the paradigm that it, in turn, challenged. Very brief philosophy lesson. I do this all the time. The traditional religious paradigms in the Western world are based on the belief that there are two worlds. The world of material stuff and the world of immaterial stuff. Some people use the term soul or heaven or God to discuss that. These two radically distinct and different realms are split all the time between the mundane and the divine, between matter and spirit, between earth and heaven. And this division, in one form or another, has dominated Western philosophy for 2,000 years. People have tried to keep those two domains separate. In the book of Matthew it says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God. Scientist Stephen Jay Gould urges us to see science and religion as representing two independent areas of inquiry. Two non-overlapping magisteria, as he calls them. And they emphasize different data. Science deals with facts, and religion deals with values, he says. And in 1999, in his book, Rock of Ages, he proclaims this, quote, blessedly simple and entirely conventional resolution to the supposed conflict between science and religion. But the two realms clash. Some people use religion to promote the effectiveness of prayer, belief in miracles, or the denial of evidence. And some people in science use it to mock religion. These days, John Hopp from Georgetown University, a theologian, who is an expert witness in the Kitzmiller trial, takes up Gould's campaign to try to establish a truce between these two realms. For Hopp, science and religion are simply different levels of explanation. Science can explain religion on a scientific level, like how it helps cultures bond, its role in society, the psychological effects of believing in a God, for example. But Hopp also appreciates that religion is, for him, something that comes out in non-scientific terms, as a human response to experiences that are not, strictly speaking, observable. For example, he claims that religion grows out of our experience of the infinite, of seeing the universe as infinite being, infinite truth, infinite goodness, and infinite love. He sees room for religious concepts like soul or spirit because they arose outside of science, he says. Science need not confirm nor deny them. It need not confirm or deny what he says is the mystery of being, the goodness that pervades everything, the unity, the coherence, the meaning, the truth, the beauty. What philosophers and theologians traditionally call the transcendentals, end quote. I'm a little skeptical of transcendentals. I'm not sure what my father, the physicist and piano player, would have said about transcendentals or this truce between the two realms of the material and the non-material. He was dedicated to scientific method and he rejected supernaturalism. But he often spoke about his work in non-scientific terms. For him, particle physics was his poetry. And there was beauty in the microscopic world of bubble chambers or in the galaxies above. Like Lori Lebo's father, who pointed to the sky at night and taught her to, quote, dream of infinity, my father found inspiration in nature. Unlike Lori Lebo's father, however, he did not add on theological implications. He was more like Carl Sagan, who found in science not God, but joy and awe. Inevitably, these experiences sort of flooded over into his sense of meaning and morality and mystery. And mystery remained even as he accumulated more and more knowledge. I like particularly a metaphor by science writer Chet Ramo, who said in so many words, imagine that all the facts we gather are like an island in a vast dark sea of ignorance. No matter how large our island grows, there will still be so much that we don't know. The shore of that island, where the beach of what we know meets the vast sea of ignorance, is mystery. And as we gain more knowledge, the shoreline grows. The more we know, the more mystery there is. That's what scientists who understand the joy of science tell us. Now, there are many ways people talk about mystery. For some on the materialistic side of the spectrum, they may say all that is a lack of knowledge. For some on the more spiritualistic side of the spectrum, they might talk about it as an active force or perhaps even a supernatural quality. I am suspicious of supernatural qualities. As a materialist, I reject supernaturalism. I embrace the consistency and verifiable of the scientific method. And I hesitate to call it universal because I think universal is an abstraction. But it's as close to the universal as we're going to get. Science offers us the most universal knowledge we're going to get. When it's pried loose from politics and power, nothing transcends differences as much as science. Scientists all over the world can agree on things. Even the Pope and the Dalai Lama believe in science. That's where we can find common ground. It's too bad that the theory of evolution did not provide us with more common ground. It fully demolished previous paradigms. Over 100 years ago, it became popularized when geologists uncovered the fact that the Earth was much older than it was. Suddenly, evolution through random mutation began to make sense. There was no need for an intelligent designer. That was not easy for followers of a designer God, right? Bergen County ethical culture leader Joe Schumann explains it this way. He says, Darwinism robs human beings of a providential God who cares for them and assures that they have a place in the universe and that their life has meaning. The reality is a tough pill for those human beings to swallow. It's a harsh blow to the human ego. For many fundamentalists, science and evolution has robbed them of beauty and awe. They saw Darwinism and science in general as corrosive of aesthetics and mystery. They echoed Edgar Allan Poe's words, "Science, why preyest thou upon the poet's heart?" Social Darwinism, which was a perversion of Darwinism, also turned many people off to science. Many people who embraced Herbert Spencer's phrase, "the survival of the fittest," argued that competition is good because it fuels growth. And it took the remarkably ruthless position concerning those who suffered due to the economic law of the jungle. Disempowered laborers were abused and killed for the greater good. And that context affected the classic battle between science and religion 90 years before the Dover decision. How many know what that is? Scopes monkey trial. Take yourself back to the 1920s, down in Tennessee. I'm not going to explain the Butler Act that outlawed the teaching of evolution in science class that John T. Scopes challenged. But I do want to share some of the explanation that my mentor Joe Schumann said about William Jennings Bryan, who was portrayed by some as a bumbling fool. He really wasn't. He took the side of religion in the trial. It was his worst moment, probably. But he was a populist who saw the world in which modernity and greed were abusing workers, farmers, men, women, and children. In some ways, Bryan a century ago and creationists today share the same protest, or a similar protest. Schumann says that this protest is a protest against elitism, against know-it-allism, against the pretensions of intellectualism and its perceived condescension. It's an expression of a culture war which uses religion as a weapon to fight that war. And Joe points out that all these atheist books that are so important to me and to him to make room for discussion and protect against religious intolerance are rejected in the American heartland, where they're perceived as the latest expression of intellectual arrogance. And in some ways, the founder of ethical humanism, Felix Adler, appreciated some of what William Jennings Bryan was trying to say. They both feared that modern capitalism destroyed beauty and abused the marginalized. Like Bryan, Adler declared that, quote, every human being, in virtue of his equality as a moral being, is invested with certain inalienable rights. Adler speaks in some ways more like his rabbi father than like a scientist. Listen to these words. He says there exists a moral law that comes out of the infinite depths and heights, that there is a voice that speaks in us out of the ultimate reality of things. It is not subject to us, but we are subject to it, and to it we must bend our pride. I like some of that. Some of it makes me a little uncertain. But he didn't let his idealism blind him from the importance of science. Science was where Adler pitched his tent. He knew that science, while challenging us, demanded a shared project based on observation and reason. It requires enlightened and engaged individuals. He wrote, the characteristic of new marks of truth, as those published by Newton, Galileo, and Darwin, is the awakening effect it has upon other thinkers. The test of the value is to be found not so much in the problems that they solve, but in the new problems which they raise. Not so much on the knowledge which they convey as in the outlook which they open up upon new lines of inquiry. Thinking is a social act. End quote. 10 years ago in York County, those afraid of change refused to support thinking as a social act. Instead, their fear of difference led them to choose blind faith over the bracing challenge of science. So I want to ask, what can we, as humanists, learn from this historic case? I'm going to turn briefly to the case of Tammy Kitzmiller v. Dover Area School District. You'll hear more this afternoon or later on. A few years before this case, in 1887, in Edwards v. Aguiar, the Supreme Court ruled that creation science cannot be taught in science class. But the embers of religious zealotry were not fully put out, and the controversy reignited when some self-appointed theistic watchdog in York County, Pennsylvania, burnt in the school parking lot a student mural portraying the descent of man. It was showing body parts. So soon the school county board was insisting that creationism be taught in science classes. Biology teachers were ordered to present intelligent design as, quote, an alternative to evolution, and to reference the now infamous creationist textbook of Pandas and People. Check it. Led by Bill Buckingham, the creationist activists attacked the standard textbook for being, get this, quote, laced with Darwinism. A biology textbook, laced with Darwinism. They said that it was, quote, inexcusable to have a book that says a man descended from apes with nothing to counterbalance it. In a science book. So, on October 18th of 2004, the school board voted 6-3 to add the following to the curriculum. Students will be made aware of the gaps and problems in Darwin's theory and of other theories of evolution, including but not limited to intelligent design. End quote. 3 school board members who voted against that resigned in protest. The school board pronounced in January of 2005 that teachers had to read the following to all 9th grade students. The Pennsylvania academic standards require students learn about Darwin's theory of evolution. Because Darwin's theory is a theory and is still being tested by new evidence, the theory is not a fact. Gaps in the theory exist for which there is no evidence. Intelligent design is an explanation of the origin of life that differs from Darwin's view. As is true with any theory, the students are encouraged to keep an open mind. It wasn't enough to tell students to keep an open mind about pseudoscience, though. This is the kicker. The school board also instructed administrators to silence criticism of their policy. Administrators said, quote, there will be no discussion, no other discussion of the issue, and your teachers will not answer questions on the issue. Gets better. This occurred at the same time that the leading intelligent design proponents said that there's no peer-reviewed articles by anyone advocating for intelligent design supported by pertinent experiments or calculations. So they admit that. Michael Behe, a science witness for the creationists, lowered the bar of science even further when he defined a scientific theory as simply, quote, a proposed explanation which focuses or points to physical observable data and logical inferences. It points to physical observation, data, and logical inferences. A definition so loose that even Behe himself admitted that it would allow astrology to be called scientific theory. The school board denied that they were sneaking intelligent design into the curriculum, and despite being represented by the Thomas More Law Center, which has its patron saint, Thomas More was the patron saint of lawyers, it uses litigation to promote the religious freedom of Christians and time-honored family values. Its stated purpose is, quote, to be a sword and shield for people of faith. That's okay, but not in the classroom. 11 parents who were infuriated by having their students learn creationism in science class turned to the Americans United for Separation of Church and State, to the American Civil Liberties Union, and the law firm of Pepper Hamilton to be their sword and shield. Ironically, the creationist activists insisted that there be no discussion of this issue, right? They accused the ACLU of Orwellian tactics to defend science. Their plaintiffs, they called, the people suing the school board, the parents, they said the plaintiff's suit was a flagrant assault on free speech. The logic is so upside down. So, led by Pepper Hamilton's Eric Rothschild, the case began when he threw out the creationist claim that it was no big a deal. Rothschild said there is no such thing as a little constitutional violation. He argued that intelligent design was not science and had no place in biology class. Pretty clear. The first witness for the plaintiff, Brown University biologist Ken Miller, effectively explained that intelligent design is not a testable theory, so it's not accepted by the scientific community. It can't be falsified, so it's outside the realm of science. Miller continued that intelligent design falsely undermines the scientific status of evolution and gives students a false understanding of what the theory actually means. And he got personal when he said he was a man of faith, but he would be insulted if his two daughters had to choose between God and science in the classroom. Thankfully, I'm going to wrap up this portion of it, bring you right to the conclusion. The challenge to science was defeated. On December 20th of 2005, Judge John E. Jones III, a Republican appointed by George W. Bush, ruled that putting intelligent design into the classroom and forcing teachers to disparage evolution was unconstitutional. And he went further and concluded that intelligent design and creationism are not science, and the Panda textbook was thrown out. Now I want to stress, this is not an attack against religion. It's a defense of science, and there is a difference. I felt flushed with victory after reading the book. I really did. It felt wonderful. Science over superstition. But I want to end my talk today by talking about the second part of my talk, the humility of science. Unlike some, I don't believe that truth exists in some other world. I don't believe in the two-world paradigm. I believe that truth is a human creation. And human beings are simply animals. When we're at our best, we're rational animals, as Descartes called us. But we're animals nonetheless. So our rational nature is constrained by emotions and desires that inspire and trouble us, that promote virtue and feed selfishness, that induce pride and shame. So when touting the benefits of science, let's humbly admit that science is the product of flawed creatures. There are gaps. We defenders of science have not always displayed such humility. The humble faith in science can give way to an arrogant assuredness. Science has been promoted as a cure for all social and political ills, and when that happens, it becomes what's called scientism. Scientism. Now, personally, I accept scientism when it's defined modestly, as the view that the characteristic inductive methods of the natural sciences are the only source of genuine factual knowledge. Facts are determined by the scientific process. But I also admit that there's more to life than facts. That's why I reject the more expansive form of scientism. I don't believe that science is the only path to understanding human experience. Philosopher Tom Sorrell says that this form of scientism puts, quote, too high a value on natural science in comparison with other branches of learning or culture. Scientism, when it becomes that extreme, dogmatically reduces human wisdom to only what we can measure. While some of you may disagree, I think that there are valuable aesthetic, emotional, and psychologically powerful experiences that can't really be measured. I don't call these facts, but they're meaningful experiences that science can't dismiss or control. They're aspects of life outside of the scope of scientific inquiry. Friedrich Hayek, in The Counter-Revolution of Science, explained that it's impossible to eliminate the human factor. For science to do so is intellectual imperialism. Sarah Maitland, a British feminist, in fact, called scientism a, quote, myth as pernicious as any sort of fundamentalism. Now, I don't want to go that far. The humility of science includes seeing scientists as human beings, often, like the rest of our species, tragically flawed. Scientists are human, just like we are. Scientists gave us an innocent Einstein, a compromised Oppenheimer, a monstrous Mengele. Professor Esselin of Providence College says, scientists have brought us great good and, yes, some great evil. Scientists, like every other group of people in the last misforgotten century, have robes streaked with blood. Scientists infected unsuspecting women in Central America with syphilis. Scientists experimented upon black men at Tuskegee. And scientists ignore the dangers of thalidomide. He continues, a physicist can tell me how a winged object can stay in the air, but he cannot, insofar as he is a physicist alone, tell me about the beauty or the nobility of the buzzard. There are, in short, things that natural science cannot do. That was even admitted by Ken Miller during the Kitzmiller trial. He said that science doesn't consider issues of meaning and purpose in the universe. He said, if I could solve the question of meaning of my life by doing an experiment in a laboratory, I assure you, I would rush off right now and do it. But these are questions that lie outside the purview of science. It doesn't say they're not important. It doesn't say that any answer to these is necessarily wrong. But it does say that science cannot address them. It's a reflection of the limitation of science. We must admit this obvious truth while defending the integrity of science. We can't allow others to replace science with superstition or substitute intelligent design for evolution. Observation and reason are the tools of science and must be defended. They must guide our public policy and our research. They have to continue to be the backbone of every science classroom in our country. We owe that to the next generation. We must send our children to science classes and teach that science, not dogma, is what belongs there. We have to allow our inquiring, skeptical minds to be ready for the future. Thank you very much.